All right. So welcome to the Minitex webinar series, Engaging with Critical Cataloging, Past and Present. My name is Sarah Ring, and I'll be your webinar host today. This webinar is being recorded, and we will be posting it to the Minitex YouTube channel after. There just may be a delay of a few days as we fix some of the automatically generated captions. There will be a Q&A. There'll be some time for Q&A at the end of this presentation, but our presenter, David, has said, if you have questions as he's presenting, feel free to just throw those in the chat, and I'll be monitoring that. And if it's related to what, the presenter is talking about at that moment, I'll interject and ask your question. Otherwise, as I said, there should be some time at the end for questions as well. If you go to the next slide, David.
All right.
So this webinar series, this is the last in the series. This is number 5, I believe. So this was an exploration of Library of Congress subject headings authority work. And many of you probably attended the past webinars where you heard about important historic projects and people from Minnesota's radical cataloging past, and more in that today. And you've probably also heard about the work from the perspective of critical catalogers engaged today. Next slide, please. So I'm happy to introduce David Lesniaski. He'll be presenting Reviving the Hennepin County Authority File. He is Associate Professor Emeritus, having recently retired from 20 years of teaching in the St. Catherine University, also known as St. Kate's, Library and Information Science program. And prior to that, he was on the faculty of St. Olaf College here in Minnesota, serving in several roles from music cataloger to co-college librarian, and prior to that was a cataloger at the University of Minnesota Libraries, cataloging Polish and Ukrainian materials for the Immigration History Research Center. So today he's going to talk about a project he worked on while at St. Catherine University. During a sabbatical, he revived the Hennepin County Library Authority file that catalogers developed from 1973 to 1999. This alternative to the Library of Congress Authority file was developed following many of the same rules and conventions, but focused on revising particular terminology for local use. David's going to give you a short overview of the process used to recreate this catalog in Koha. And then finally, he'll also demonstrate how subject headings link to each other and to relevant bibliographic records in a coherent and user-friendly manner. He argues that a catalog at its best shows relationships between terms and leads users from what they know to an expanded conceptual map of vocabulary, concepts, and bibliographic items relevant to their inquiry. The Hennepin County Library Catalog and Subject Authority File can still serve as a model for subject authority practice today because of the sustained intellectual effort of the Hennepin County Library catalogers over time. So with that, I'm happy to turn it over to David, and I will, as I said, jump in if there are questions asked in the chat throughout today. Thanks.
All right. Thank you very much for the introduction. So here we are. Well, now you know what the whole story is about. So the rest is details. So I'm going to say, so you can go home. But no, I hope this is a good trip. And I can show you things that outside of this particular file are actually kind of hard to see, and make a case for the relationships that Sandy and his colleagues over the course of 20 years developed. Bibliographic relationships and conceptual relationships are actually central to what we ought to be doing as catalogers. So this is it. That's the site. You can just click on that if you want to play with this during the presentation. And it's really, this is a plain vanilla installation using Koha. Koha is an open source, fully developed library system. So it has cataloging, circulation, acquisitions, any module that you would expect from an expensive paid system. I did not do anything with the graphics, any of the bells and whistles on this particular system. It's just there to house the bibliographic records from the Sandy and his colleagues' catalog and the subject authority records. There are a couple of names in there. I did not load the full name authority record file either. It's just subjects and bibliographic records, because I think those are the most important things to take a look at. So at that site, I'm not going to read through all of this. You can do that on your own time. It tells what's there and how you can search it. On the site itself, so there, I was just playing around with that. There it is. There's also a document that you can access that tells a little more detail about what the site is and how to use it. You can look at it through the public mode, which I'll be doing in this presentation. There's also a limited staff mode where you can view the actual MARC records, and you can actually do your own, if you know SQL, searches to download and retrieve MARC records. One fun search for those of you who are into that might be to find out how many of those records are actually labeled HCL, that is, they're headings created by the Hennepin County Library by Sandy and his colleagues that later became official LC headings. So I didn't really know Sandy at all when I started library school. And I have to confess, the worst class I ever had was cataloging. Until I happened to be wandering around the library and came across this odd little book called The Joy of Cataloging. And first action was, you've got to be kidding. Then I started real catalogers do, and I got hooked. So I never visited Sandy. I looked at the Hennepin County Cataloging Bulletin from time to time in the various positions I was in. And thought, well, this is pretty neat. This is the way it ought to be done. And then, of course, found the story in City Pages a while ago that told what happened to Sandy and the catalog itself. I will not say what I'm currently thinking about library administrators or the ALA Code of Ethics, but I thought that was really an unfortunate, I guess that's a nice Minnesota vanilla word, to describe what happened. Fortunately, shot of the catalog before it disappeared and was able to download all the MARC records from the catalog, and those were stored at the University of Illinois, which is very nice. So I downloaded those files and looked at them and thought, well, this is very nice, but individual MARC records don't really tell you much, especially about the relationships from record to record. So I've been looking for a long time for a way to see if there was a way to recreate the catalog, or at least show the connection between the conceptual items, that is, the subject authority records, and the bibliographic records that they attach to. Why were these terms chosen? The bib records give you the evidence, whereas just a list of terms doesn't really tell you that much. It simply tells you that somebody chose a term for some reason, and you don't know what that reason is. So I needed a couple of things: an online system, the records, which I had, and a way to link them. Now, Koha, I'd been using pretty much from the get-go when I started teaching the cataloging, organization of knowledge course at St. Kate's. Really, I don't think that there's any way to learn how. The point wasn't to teach students to be catalogers. It was to let students get their hands dirty exploring the different systems that make up the current cataloging infrastructure. You know, when you actually have to grapple with Dewey, with the LC subject headings, LC, and so on, and figure out how to even if somebody never wants to do this again, they know the process. And one of my concerns, having been a library director, is that 99% of library directors do not have the slightest clue about what goes on in technical services and why it matters. So I hope that's, even though I have heard comments about the work that students had to do in that course, I hope they at least walked away with an appreciation for the complexity of our bibliographic universe and an appreciation for what can be done in it. So let's try to pull up a couple of things here. So this is our Koha that I used at St. Kate's, again, plain vanilla Koha, where students could dump records. In a systems class, we did a different installation of Koha. Yes, that really is Greek. And it's kind of fun because if you want to look at the interface in a couple of different languages, there you go. Isn't that neat? And it does make me wonder just a little bit that this system is free. You can download it, install it on a server for a cost of exactly zero. When we pay, I don't really want to think of how much for systems that cannot express any language other than English. Even when I was in Greece, working there 25 years ago, we had a system that was both Greek and English. You could have bibliographic and authority records with a mix of both languages within the same record. And I am floored that here in the Twin Cities, where something like 100 different languages are spoken, our catalogs are all English because, of course, everyone speaks English. Well, I'm probably preaching to the choir, but I do wonder why a free system can do this, whereas expensive systems cannot. So that was Koha, that was great, loved it, but it still didn't do what I wanted it to do until a few years ago, when finally a subroutine was developed that actually would link the bibliographic file with the authority file. Aha. So I thought, time to get started on this. And so I did. I rented a server, installed security, installed Linux, Apache, SQL, and Koha. Which actually may sound daunting, but it really wasn't. I am not a tech wizard by any means. If I can do this, you can do this. Koha has a great community that's very supportive. And I really was in touch with that community step by step to say, okay, I've gotten this far, what do I do next? Just for funses here, there's the Koha home site. I use Debian for that particular version of Linux, step-by-step instructions for what you have to do. Oh yes, once you've done it, here's how to configure the whole system so it does what you want. And for those of you who are really into this, this particular sequence of software that you install has been the same for, my goodness, decades. So really nothing new here, nothing mysterious. This really is something that can be done by pretty much anyone. And although I've used this for standalone libraries, and there are a couple in the Twin Cities that Eastside Freedom Library uses Koha, the Walker Art Center also uses Koha. It also works quite well as a full-fledged library system. So I just showed you that. So again, while I'm talking, just go ahead and play with these. I wanted to bring up a couple of different types of searches. Some of those I probably will have listed here, others I'm just going to make up. So I'm taking a look at a couple of different libraries, the current Hennepin County Library catalog, Anoka County, since at least for a while they were creating their own subject headings, and then New York Public. So if we do just a plain old search on Koha, there we are, subject search, and let's see what it says. And it looks like any old catalog. You get a bunch of records in what order I don't have a clue about. And get a list of topics here over at the side, of which don't. If I do that search here in Hennepin County, the current Hennepin County, Subject search and white collar workers, we get stuff. I don't have a clue why it's in the order it is. And we also get this list of related topics off to the side. Well, that's all very nice. The problem I have with this is, first, I don't learn anything about the subject. I type in something, I get results. And I have to look through all of those results to see if they mean anything or not. If I'm smart enough to figure out there's this list of topics over here, it's not exactly clear to me. Oops, I have no idea why that happened. What those topics have to do with anything. I'll come back to that in a moment. And that I find a bit troubling. However, there is a better way to do this. And some classic catalogs, still, if you do a lot of searching, you can find them. When you type in a subject search, you actually get a list of subject headings, which tell you something about the topic. I have a list of subdivisions, and then it also gives you that same term rotated through the complete list of subject headings in that catalog. Okay, this is New York Public, big library, they'll have lots of stuff. But still, you get a good sense of what your term means, where it lies, and how it connects with other terms. And I thought, gee, that's what Sandy's work was all about. Why couldn't we do something like that? Well, as it turns out, you can. If you go into that catalog, I'll come back here, and you click on the authority search. In a standard catalog, when you search by subject, for example, you're actually not doing a subject search, as far as I can tell. You're really doing a subject keyword search, which is quite different and gives you very different results. It pulls in a lot of terms that are nowhere in any particular subject heading. They're somewhere else in the record. And that's what that list of topics off to the side is. Terms picked by popularity in the list of records that shows up when you do a supposed subject search. I really, quite frankly, don't find this particularly useful, particularly if I'm investigating a subject that has a certain depth to it. So if we search in the authority file, and you can choose all sorts of options in Koha, I'm just leaving things as they are, then you get a list of subject headings that are related. And these are all the terms that are directly related, that is, they were cross-referenced to the term you typed in. I don't know about you, but I think a list like this is a lot more useful than simply a list of terms pulled more or less at random from the records that happen to show up when you do what is essentially a subject keyword search. This gives you the intellectual map of that term that you typed in, what it's related to. And not only that, other terms that may not be directly related, but are secondary links. So looking through all of this, right, you really get a fair idea of the scope of this particular collection. You get a list of useful terms that are related to yours. And finally, over here, you actually get a bibliographic record that gives you some sense of the context for that term. Now, again, current catalogs, unlike et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, links to Wikipedia, which I think is absolutely great. I did none of that with this. This is just the plain old catalog. But this does give you a sense of what this is about and perhaps why this particular record showed up. Get back to the presentation. And I'm going to play around a little bit with a couple of other terms. Actually, before I get to Christian radicals, I was looking up family values, which has been kind of a big deal. Oh, shoot. I wonder if it'll get me back. Here I did white collar workers in Anoka County. Same deal. You get a bunch of stuff, and then you get a bunch of other related terms. But truly, if you think about it, I'm not sure what binge box has to do with white collar workers. And as you click through this, well, Christmas films, divorced people. I mean, I don't know. I just find something like this not terrifically useful as you're trying to find your way around the literature. So actually, I guess I will go to Christian radicals. I just kind of can search up here somewhere. So again, in the Hennepin County, if we do authority search, on Christian radicals, again, you get a pretty nice layout of what this term means and what it's connected to. And some of these I would not really have ever figured out, like Quaker women, never figured out on my own. And then if we take a look at a particular record, this one, the radical tradition, one of the ones that was listed, well, you do kind of get some sense, you get the contents of what this is about, and some really interesting connections that certainly I never might have thought about. Putting Christian saints and Christian social advocates together in the same record might have occurred to me, but it certainly did to Sandy and his colleagues. So when I look this up on the current Hennepin County site, and Hennepin County catalogers, if you're here in the audience, I'm not trashing you. I'm just saying that there was a lot of good information that was destroyed by a particular library administrator and set of administrators, which I think was really too bad. So here we have the title. Nice stuff imported. I think that's wonderful. But when you look at the actual subjects, that's it. When you look at Sandy's cataloging, I think you learn a lot more. That's one of the reasons I think this catalog still has a lot of utility. There are terms in here that are not still approved by Library of Congress. These terms are fairly useful. They're terms people would search under. And the quality of the cataloging and subject analysis, I find, is much better still than what the standard bibliographic record that most libraries import show. So I just move ahead a little bit. Now, I don't know how many hundreds of terms that Sandy and his colleagues created. It was several hundred. And a study done even 15 years ago showed that the Library of Congress increasingly was adopting a lot of these terms. I haven't run the lists to do any comparison yet. Sandy has a score sheet that he keeps, and that's available on the Sandy Berman website, that shows where these terms are in process. But I find it fascinating that eventually the Library of Congress does come around and does accept a lot of those terms. However, one of the points of this session is that terms are great, right? It's good to see vocabulary, and it's good to get some vocabulary from somewhere else that resonates with what you think a particular item is about. When you're cataloging, what are you really doing? Think about it. You're not just recording the information that's there. You're allowing the voice of the creator to speak. You are giving voice to the creator of a particular work, whatever that work is. and you're using all of the bibliographic tools you have at your disposal. The bibliographic record, the data in that record, notes you make, notes you don't make, a robust list of subject headings, good classification, and so on, that ensure the voice of the creator comes through, and it comes through in a way that connects that particular work to the rest of the collection, right? Because the catalog is really an intellectual map, or it should be an intellectual map of the entire library collection. And that means, and I think Sandy was very not only aware of this, but one of his motivations for doing what he did is that you don't have a generic collection. You have a particular one. Make that collection accessible to your community by using vocabulary that's understandable, by connecting terms, and by showing the connections from one work to another in that catalog. As I said, there's vocabulary and more vocabulary. And this is just a quick list, 2 more lists. They're lovely, they're wonderful, but they don't show you the connection between the concept and the bibliographic record or set of bibliographic records the concept applies to. Without that, I think it's hard to know, if you have a choice of several competing terms, which one or ones to choose. So one of the points that I wanted to make here and in setting up the Hennepin County catalog is that this gives a context for all of the terms that are in the subject authority file. You can look up a term, you can go to the bibliographic records that contain that term and say, oh, that's why they chose that term instead of something else. Or this particular term expresses concepts in these items that no other term, including LC official terms, expresses. And I find it really heartening to see that many, many libraries out there are creating their own terms, right, and using them. So, already said that, I'll move on. Wouldn't it be nice? I'll let you stare at this for a few minutes while I muse on. If our catalogs did something like this. I mean, this is what they're really supposed to do. Okay, so I'm not sure how much you can see on your screen, but kind of toward the left is Harry Potter, Chamber of Secrets. And there's a bibliographic record that I kind of color-coded in RDA, according to the RDA concepts, showing, for example, what is expression level, what's manifestation, et cetera, what's work level, using different colors. And then I just pulled up brief snippets of records, in some cases, full records and others, the MARC records that are connected, linked to that original record, the Chamber of Secrets. All the subject headings that are in that particular record, right, that are direct link. The author, J.K. Rowling, who also goes by several other names. So I not only have the creator record there, but also other records that are other versions of J.K. Rowling. A title, right? Every good title should have an authority record linked to it. And then related to that, what are the other related works to that title? I mean, wouldn't it be terrific if when you did a search for a subject, you had a map like this? If you did a search for a particular item from that subject list, you had a map like this, and you could customize that map to say, oh, show me the related works. Show me the related works by author. Hey, what about subjects? It would be so easy to navigate something like this, right? Other than, and not a list of terms in English. And I still wonder why our current catalogs have coding that basically is from the 1980s, 1990s, with a spiffy web interface slapped on and a lovely discovery layer or obfuscation layer, depending on your point of view, slapped onto that. And why work hasn't been done to create a visually attractive catalog that shows relationships. Which brings me kind of to my next to the last point, which is this. I think as catalogers, I certainly know in my days when I started cataloging, I obsessed over the details in the bibliographic record. But the real treasures are actually in the authority records, right? That's where the, I would say, essential conceptual information lies. We extract that and map it into the bibliographic records. But if you want to do in-depth searching, you really are searching not bibliographic records, but authority records. There's absolutely no reason, good reason, I should say, why somebody couldn't say, I'd like a list of all the poetry books you have in your collection written by Minnesota poets who were born after 1970. If you look in the name authority records for the people, that information is there, right? The 3XX fields in the authority record contain that sort of information. Poetry, great subject. You're searching the authority file for that information. You're not searching the bibliographic file. Now we think we're really searching the bibliographic file most of the time. And I think this is why I find a lot of searches frustrating and woefully incomplete, because they're not telling me what is linking to the stuff that's pulled up or what's linking in a meaningful way. I think certainly by spending the time I did in working with Sandy's catalog, by going through the whole install, I certainly got an appreciation for what Koha can do and the Koha community can do. But more so, as I looked through the records and played with the authority records, did searches, looked at the bib records, that there's a real coherence to the catalog, both the bibliographic catalog in terms of the cataloging, what's chosen, what's not chosen to put into the records. In the subject file especially, the wealth of links from any particular concept to all the others. And then in the relationship between the bibliographic records and those subject authority records. This is certainly not something I ever learned in library school. And I think it took a lot of experience cataloging and then working with this particular catalog, I think, to develop a real appreciation and understanding that what we're doing when we catalog is not just listing the information that's there, or even going beyond that, not just giving the voice of the creator a voice, but putting that voice in context through the entire conceptual universe that we're creating or should be creating through the catalog. So kind of getting to the end here. Well, take away from this what you will. Hey, even the PCC said, create your own subject headings. LC just isn't sufficient anymore. I think that this first came out in either a note or an appendix to an official PCC report, but it was there. And goodness, if the gods speak, in that kind of voice, I think we certainly can listen. Second, if you're a cataloger, rich, full, complete records. And if you have any way to customize your authority file, I know Alyssa spoke about that several weeks ago, what you can and can't do in different systems, by all means, do create your own headings, and especially add robust links to the headings that are already there. I found one kind of easy way to do this was to run a list of failed searches to see why they failed. If somebody did a subject search and came up with nothing, that's a total disaster. That should never happen. Well, misspellings are an obvious thing, but using slightly the wrong concept was another thing, and something like that should be easily fixable in any subject authority file. I understand the complexities of maintaining an authority file like that, but the more freedom that we have, and as a community, the more we demand that freedom, I think the closer we'll get to it. What I'd love to have happen with this site right now is just sitting there on a server that I rent, and it's there for the world to see. I would love for a community of interested people to take either this site or make a duplicate of it, open it up to the world and say, okay, add your own headings. along with bibliographic records that those headings are related to. I think it'd be a great sandbox, a way to test out vocabulary. It's like, pop it over the lister of, hey, I just entered such and such a record with these headings. What do you think? And then I think there could be robust discussion about the utility of those headings, and especially how any new heading could link to the headings that are already there in the catalog. And I'm not so much interested in having somebody create a list of vocabulary, tons of those out there, but rather the links between the vocabularies, and especially any new term or replacement term that comes up or is created, and the vocabulary that's already out there. So in some ways, I think I'm really preaching to the choir here, but I think there's a lot to learn from the work that was done over 20 some odd years by Sandy and his colleagues, not only in terms of particular vocabulary, cataloging techniques, but most importantly, how to create a coherent conceptual universe with doors open wide to anyone who comes along and searches and finds that the catalog is inviting and it's a great place to explore. So that's what's been on my mind for a while, and I'm happy to take any questions, comments, and so on that you all have.
Thank you, David. I'll jump in just as the moderator to ask questions for David or ideas, as he says in his last bullet. Ideas are definitely welcome for continuing the project. And if you'd rather unmute to ask your question verbally, that would be okay too. Otherwise, we'll defer to the chat here. All right, it looks like Violet raised your hand. Thanks, Violet. Did you have a question?
I do. Hi. And I was trying to chat, and then I can't figure out how to do it. This is super interesting. First of all, thanks for this work. I think a lot of us are interested in sort of thinking about how we ensure that the Library of Congress subject headings that we have, such as they are, and as imperfect as they are sort of preserved before the Trump administration has a chance to dismantle some of them. I'm thinking about, how do we sort of before things are reverted, like for example, like they were with Gulf of America and that sort of thing. And I wonder if you can see a role for sort of like a, a sort of I don't know, forking LCSH as it is before the horrors to come, or if there's a space. I don't know. I'm not quite sure what I'm getting at there, and so sorry, this is not a good fully formed question. But I'm wondering if there's a role for this sort of catalog with sort of preserving LCSH sort of as it is now.
Mm-hmm. Oh, well, absolutely. I don't have a good sense of how many headings are going to be modified by the current administration over time. But I think, yeah, it would, well, here's a way to do it. Find a server, install stuff, put up Koha, and then just upload, if you will, to the site, the bibliographic and authority records, and link them in Koha. And you just add a note, valid subject heading as of such and such a date, changed to such and such. There's your 4XX field, right, on such and such a date, and the whole history is right there. So I certainly could see a site like this. I also could see a somewhat bigger site as a larger collection of alternative vocabularies with the LC1s, embedded in that as well. And it'd be certainly with Kohio, I didn't do a lot of fancy searching in the authority file, but you can tweak the search parameters. So you could search, say, for only LC headings, not everybody else's headings. So yeah, I think something like this would be good for two reasons. First, you preserve the headings. The terms are there, you have complete authority records, no mess, no fuss. Second, you have at least something that they link to. And you can also record the history in the authority file.
Thank you so much. Yeah, something to think about. I have 1,000 different projects, and I'm like, oh, do I need one more project? But it seems like this is a terrific way to sort of centralize some of the work that we all are doing separately right now, in ensuring we have these local vocabularies that are alternatives to whatever comes next with LCSH. Thank you.
Sure, and I'd like to say this is a one-person project, but that's really not true. I mean, yeah, I did the stuff, I typed the code, blah, 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 but this is a community, right? I didn't create the data that's there. Sandy and his colleagues did. I certainly had a lot of back and forth with the server administrator, with the whole Koha community about how to do this. So it really is a community project. And I think what you're talking about really is, in a lot of ways, a community project. In some ways, I think the most difficult part is organizing the community. I think the technical part is really not that daunting, but it's getting together a group of like-minded people who say, yeah, this really is important. And I see there's a comment in the chat. Great. Yes, please do. I'd love to hear what you all think about this and if this is helpful to you in your work.
We have some other questions for David before we wrap up. David, would you mind just going to the next slide for me?
All right.
Thank you. All right, I think I paused and given time people to ask questions who had them. But I agree with the person who left the recent comment, having no particular coherent thoughts right now, but I think you've given us a lot to think about and take away. And so I just have a couple things real quick to say to wrap up the series. And if you could go to the next slide, please. Just a couple of reminders. So I'm putting these links in the chat. This first one, of course, is to survey. After every webinar, we've given a link. So if you haven't commented yet, we would love to hear from you. I can't take credit for this series. My former colleague, Alyssa Becknell, organized this along with a great slate of presenters. Thank you to everyone who participated, came to the webinars, presented at the webinars. But we'd really like to offer more of this type of content and would like to keep it going. So if we hear good comments from you, that is good. I can bring that to my boss and hopefully continue to offer things like this for the community. So that's just a plug for please give us some feedback. And then the other link is just a link to the Minitex YouTube channel. There's a playlist that has all the recordings. If you could go to one more slide, David. That's the end slide. So that's the YouTube playlist link put in the chat. And I will also, after the webinar, send out a copy of the recording and a link to David's slides as well. And anything else David would like to share. Would anyone else like to make any final comments? Any of the former presenters or David before we say goodbye?
No, just thank you so much for for hosting this space. David, thank you so much for, I mean, really honestly, and I just so much to think about how we could move beyond just this list, this, like a hierarchical list, and really do that representation well. Thank you so much for those ideas. And thanks to Sarah, thanks to Minitex, thanks to Alyssa for this space and the space to build this community as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Violet. All right. One more thank you to David. David, hopefully you see some good comments in the chat there. People are saying their thanks for sharing your knowledge today. And with that, I think we can wrap up. Have a good day, everybody.
All right. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for tuning in, everyone.
All right. We'll be in touch. Thanks.
Okay. All right.